You have done something good that nobody knows about. Maybe it was small, a conversation you had with someone at exactly the right moment, a choice you made quietly when no one was watching, something you gave that cost you more than anyone around you realized. Or maybe it was not small at all. Maybe it was something that required real effort, real sacrifice, real courage, and still, somehow, the world moved on around it as if it had not happened. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody thanked you. Nobody came back to say that it mattered. And somewhere in you, in a part that does not often speak, you have started to wonder whether any of it was real, whether you imagined it mattered, whether the thing you did quietly is still doing anything at all in a world that never confirmed it. You are not the only one who has lived inside that uncertainty. But here's what almost no one understands about doing good without recognition, and what happened to one man who kept a secret for 50 years will change how you think about every invisible thing you have ever done. This is a story about a man named Nicholas Winton, a British stockbroker who went somewhere he did not have to go, did something no one had asked him to do, and then spent 50 years never saying a word about it. Welcome to the silent lesson. Nicholas Winton was 29 years old in December of 1938. He worked as a stockbroker in London. He had a comfortable, organized life, an apartment, a social circle, a job that occupied his days reliably. He had plans for Christmas, a ski holiday in Switzerland with friends. The trip was booked. The arrangements were made. Then a friend telephoned from Prague and said, simply, "You should come. Something is happening here that you need to see." Winton canceled the ski trip. He packed a bag, bought a train ticket, and traveled east toward a city he had never visited to see something his friend had not fully described. He did not think of this as a significant decision. He thought of it as a change of plans. What he found in Prague was not what he had been imagining from newspaper headlines. The newspapers described the refugee crisis as a statistic. Hundreds of thousands of Jews and political opponents fleeing Czechoslovakia after Hitler's forces had moved in. The newspapers did not describe the weight of cold in the refugee camps on the outskirts of the city, or the specific sounds that come from a place where thousands of people are living in conditions not designed for human beings, or the expression on the face of a parent who understands what is approaching and has run out of ways to stop it. Winton walked through the camps for 3 days. He spoke to families through interpreters. He listened, not to what people said when they were trying to be composed and polite, but to what slipped through when the composure cracked. He heard the same thing from parent after parent, in various words, in various languages, with various degrees of desperation. The children must get out. Whatever else happens, the children must get out. The British government had established a program called the Kinder Transport, a formal arrangement for Jewish children from Germany and Austria to be brought to Britain and placed with foster families. But Czechoslovakia was not included in the program. Nobody had arranged it. Nobody had asked for it to be arranged. The children in the Czech camps existed bureaucratically in a gap between programs. On the third evening, Winton sat down at a table in his hotel room with a notebook. He wrote at the top of the first page, "Children's section." Then he began making a list. He did not have a plan. He had a question. Could the children be gotten out? And he had decided without much deliberation that the correct way to answer a question was to attempt to answer it, not to wait for someone more qualified to arrive, not to write a letter to an authority, not to raise awareness, to simply begin the work and see what was required. He set up an unofficial office in the hotel room. He got lists of children from the camp administrators. He began writing letters to the British government, to Jewish organizations across Europe, to families and religious institutions in Britain that might be willing to take in a child. The British government told him the program did not apply to Czechoslovakia. He continued writing letters. Organizations told him this was not the correct channel for such requests. He continued writing letters and began making phone calls. He placed advertisements in British newspapers. Jewish children need homes. He stated the need plainly. No decorative language, no appeals to sentiment, just the specific practical situation and a request. The letters didn't just trickle in. They poured in, hundreds of them. He interviewed each family by correspondence, matched children to families based on age and circumstance, arranged the paperwork for each placement. The paperwork was substantial and often obstructed. Check exit permits, British entry permits, transit visas for the countries the trains would cross. Some of these documents came through legitimate channels. Some did not. When official papers could not be obtained in time for a specific child, Winton found other ways to produce them. He did not dwell on this. He had decided that the children needed to get on the trains, and that the paperwork was a practical problem, rather than a moral one. Between January and August of 1939, working from a dining room table in his London flat after his regular working hours, Nicholas Winton organized 8 trains. Each train left Prague and traveled across Germany and the Netherlands to the English coast, then by ferry to Britain, where the foster families he had recruited were waiting at Liverpool Street Station. The children wore numbered tags around their necks, identity numbers Winton's operation had assigned to each of them. They carried small suitcases or cloth bundles containing what their parents had decided they could take: a toy, a photograph, a piece of clothing chosen for reasons the child might not understand until much later. At the station in Prague, parents brought their children to the platform and watched the train doors close. There were parents who held their composure at the platform so that their children would not be frightened. There were parents who did not manage this. There were young children who were too small to understand what was happening, who simply cried because their mothers were crying. There were older children who understood exactly what was happening and stood very still, as if keeping themselves steady was the last useful thing they could do for their parents before the train pulled away. Winton later said he did not allow himself to think too much about the platform scenes while the operation was in progress. There was always another thing to arrange. Staying focused on the specific, solvable problem of the next step was the only way to keep moving forward. By the summer of 1939, he had gotten 669 children to Britain. The 9th train was the largest. It was scheduled to depart Prague on the 1st of September, 1939. 250 children had been placed on the manifest, 250 names, each one matched to a foster family waiting in Britain. The documents were in order. The train was ready. On the 1st of September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Britain and France declared war 2 days later. The borders closed overnight. All trains stopped. The 9th train never left the station. Of the 250 children whose names were on that manifest, children who had been told they were leaving, whose parents had said goodbye at home that morning, who had already begun imagining what England would be like, almost none survived the war. Winton learned this after it ended. He was told the figure matter-of-factly, the way you are told difficult things, when the person telling you has also lived through something terrible and learned to say true things directly. He did not respond dramatically. He did not tell anyone what he was feeling. He went back to what he was doing. He put his papers in a cardboard box. He carried the box to the attic of his house. He did not look at it again. He married a woman named Greet. He had children. He returned to work at the stock exchange. He joined local organizations, helped organize civic projects in his community, lived an ordinary, useful life. He did not tell his wife about Prague. He did not tell his friends. He did not tell anyone who did not already know. For 50 years, the box sat in the attic. The silence was not the silence of guilt. It was not shame, and it was not modesty in the conventional sense. It was something quieter than any of those. The particular silence of a man who had done what the situation required and then moved on to the next thing the situation required. As if the idea that this made him exceptional had simply not occurred to him in any form that felt real. He thought of himself as someone who had done what anyone would have done, given the same information and the same access. He thought of himself, when he thought about it at all, as someone who had been in the right place at the right time and had done the obvious thing. The question of whether others would have done the same, whether the same situation placed before a different person would have produced the same result, was not a question he seems to have spent time on. He got on with his life. He was, by most accounts, a happy man. He had a family he loved, work that interested him, a community he was part of. The box in the attic was a fact about his past, the way many facts about a person's past are, real and finished, and not requiring constant attention. The 669 children he had saved grew up. They had children of their own, then grandchildren. They became teachers and doctors and engineers and parents. They lived full lives in Britain and in other countries they had eventually made their way to. Many of them did not know the name of the man who had organized their evacuation. They had been put on a train. They had arrived. They had lived. The consequence of what Winton had done in those 8 months was expanding through time in ways he had no knowledge of, no contact with, and had not sought. In 1988, Greet Winton was going through old papers in the attic when she found the box. Inside it were lists of names, children's names, hundreds of them, in careful handwriting, letters in English and German and Czech, photographs of children on train platforms with numbered tags around their necks, documents bearing her husband's signature, a scrapbook someone had assembled from press clippings and correspondence and photographs covering the 8 months of the operation in detail. She did not understand what she was looking at. She brought the box downstairs and asked him to explain it. He told her. She sat with this for a long time. Her husband, the man she had been married to for decades, whose routines she knew, whose habits she could predict, whose silences she had never thought to question, had done this. In 1939, before they had met, a 29-year-old stockbroker had canceled a ski holiday, gone to Prague, and organized the rescue of 669 children from a hotel room and a dining room table, and had then spent 50 years saying nothing about it. She contacted a Holocaust researcher. The researcher began tracing the children, adults now, in their 50s and 60s, scattered across Britain and around the world. Many of them had spent their lives knowing only that they had been put on a train in Prague in 1939 and had arrived in England, and that somewhere in that process, someone had made arrangements. They did not know the name of the person who had made those arrangements. The researcher found them. She contacted a television program. She began making plans. In 1988, a British television program called That's Life invited Nicholas Winton to appear as a member of the studio audience. He was told only that there was something the program wanted to show him. He dressed in his suit and went to the studio and took a seat in the audience among people he did not know. The host of the program held up a photograph from 1939, children on a platform, numbered tags around their necks. She asked, "Is the man who organized these transports in the audience this evening?" Winton raised his hand. The host then said, "Would everyone in this audience who owes their life to Nicholas Winton please stand up?" The entire audience stood. He had not known they were there. He had come to watch a program, not to be the subject of one. He had sat down among 300 people without knowing that all 300 of them were alive because of decisions he had made when he was 29 years old. And now they were standing. He looked at them. He could not speak. He was 79 years old, and the consequence of what he had done in Prague in 1939, a consequence he had put in a box in the attic and not looked at for 50 years, was standing in front of him in 300 human beings, most of them older now than he had been when he saved them, many of them parents and grandparents themselves. The camera moved to his face, and what was on it was not triumph, and it was not vindication, and it was not the look of a man who has been proved right. It was something simpler and harder to name. The look of a man encountering the full weight of something he had done and had spent 50 years living alongside without fully feeling, and feeling it all at once. He wept. He wept for the 669 who were there, and for the 250 who were not. He wept for the parents on the platforms in Prague who had watched the trains go. He wept, perhaps, for the 29-year-old who had sat in a hotel room with a notebook and a question, with no authority and no program and no guarantee that any of it would work, and had begun. The story of Nicholas Winton is told as a story about heroism. But that framing, while understandable, misses the thing that makes it actually useful to the rest of us. Most of us are not going to save 669 lives from a hotel room in Prague. Most of us are not going to face a situation that dramatic, and most of us are not going to spend 50 years sitting on a secret that large. The scale of what Winton did is rare enough that be more like Winton is not a practical lesson for an ordinary Tuesday. But here is what is practical. Here is what applies to every person who has done something good and not been seen for it. Winton did not know, when he opened that notebook in December of 1938, that what he was about to do would matter in the way it mattered. He did not know it would expand through time, through 669 lives and their children and their children's children, into thousands of people living lives they would not have had. He knew only that there were children in camps, that it was possible to get some of them out, and that no one else had started doing it yet. He did the obvious thing. He began. And then, for 50 years, the thing he had done was real in the world, continuing, expanding, compounding through time, without any awareness or attention from him, without him needing to know about it, without the world needing to confirm it. The children grew up. They had full lives. They did not need him to be watching for any of it to count. This is the thing most of us have not fully understood about the good we do quietly. It does not stop when we stop thinking about it. The conversation you had with someone at the right moment, you do not know what they did the next day, or the next year, or who they became partly because of what you said. The choice you made that cost you something, and that no one noticed. You do not know what space it created, what it made possible, what it prevented. The thing you gave, the time you spent, the patience you offered when you did not feel patient. All of it went somewhere, into consequences you cannot see from where you stand and may never be told about. You will probably not have 300 people stand up for you in a television studio. But the standing is not the point. The standing was simply the moment Winton got to see what had always been true. It had been true for 50 years. It was true before anyone confirmed it. What you have done quietly, it is already true. It does not need your awareness of it to be real. Tell me in the comments, just one sentence. What is something you did quietly that you never got credit for? You don't have to explain the whole story. One line is enough. If you know someone who has been working hard at something good that nobody seems to notice. Send this to them. Not as consolation, as evidence. And if you want to find more of these quiet lessons, stay with the silent lesson.